Ed, thank you very much for coming on. How are we doing?
Um, Pleasure, first of all, and yeah, I'm well. The world seems to be waking up again. Been back and forth to London for the first time in probably over a year, which was exciting. Felt like a big day out, having been stuck in the house for pretty much a year.
Pros and cons, I think, isn't it? We were
Yeah,
just chatting before we started about how travel, time spent on trains, etc., seems like an easy task, but actually takes quite a lot from you. And being out of the house comes with its own challenges. So we've been desensitized to all that stuff, I guess, at this point.
yeah, for sure. It was actually quite nice to be on a quiet train. Like we spoke before, the Wi-Fi was actually working. So because there was hardly anyone on the train, so that made quite a big difference. But those things you get, like you said, you get numb to. It's weird how when they're taken away for quite a while, they become a novelty again. But I'm sure that'll wear off pretty quickly when I'm stuck on a crammed tube train in a month's time.
I'm sure it will, and that's the theme that I think will come up in a different way later on as we develop this conversation in terms of taking things for granted once they're gone. But I think I'm going to kick things off by asking as succinctly as you can, who is Ed Jackson?
Well, it depends who you ask. But my wife might say one thing, my friends might say another. But I suppose a little brief. I am from Bath, from the West Country in England, and I one thing led to another. When I was younger, I was born, reasonably athletically gifted over probably academically gifted, and I ended up going into a professional rugby career after I left school, which was kind of living the dream. Um, what I'd always wanted to do since I grew up, coming from Bath, this big rugby town. And I went on to have a 10-year career professionally, playing in the Premiership for in England for Wasps, London Welsh, and then I played for the Dragons in the Pro 14 over in Wales. And yeah, absolutely loved it. It was kind of my identity, I suppose. It's what I'd always done since I was quite young. And but then in 2017, April 2017, I was having some time off from an injury and chose the wrong end of a swimming pool to dive into, which was quite ironic, as I used to be a squad swimmer when I was younger, and I'd survived 10 years of professional rugby, but it was a swimming pool that ended up giving me my most serious injury, which was dislocated neck, C6, C7. I'd hit my head on the bottom of the pool so hard that the disc had exploded and cut my spinal cord in half. So I was rendered completely paralyzed from the shoulders down, which was obviously pretty terrifying. First off, because I was in a swimming pool, so I was staring up at the surface, wondering why I couldn't move. Um, but fortunately, my dad was in the pool, and one of my friends, they pulled me to the surface, and so I didn't drown. Hence why I'm talking to you. But I was left with a very serious spinal cord injury. I was rushed to hospital. I've since learned that I was actually resuscitated three times in the in the ambulance. So puts a slightly different spin on how lucky I am to even be here at all. And then I underwent a 7-hour operation to realign my neck, saved my spinal cord, what was left of it, and then I woke up in intensive care with a very uncertain future. It was a week, and I still had no movement or sensation return. I was categorized as Asia A1, which is the highest level of spinal cord injury, a complete spinal cord injury, and told that I'd most likely never walk again. I was just hoping to get the use of my arms back. So that was a tough thing to hear at the time, very scary thing to hear, especially considering my whole life and purpose was wrapped up in using my body for work, if you like, and then I was just a head on a pillow. And I think it was one of those, you think these things happen to everyone else, and you don't think they happen to you. And I was facing a very uncertain future, but I got lucky. I suppose a lot of hard work from not just me, but from a lot of amazing people, physios, doctors, um, friends, family, and things started to come back in my favor. And over the course of the last 4 years, I've sort of worked my way back to a point where I am walking around, albeit with a lot of complications that come with a spinal cord injury. So I'm technically quadriplegic. All four limbs are affected. Categorized as a walking quadriplegic. I have foot drop on the left side. The left side of my body has about 3% power compared to the right. So I'm sort of cut down the middle with something called Brown-Séquard syndrome, but I won't put you to sleep explaining exactly what that is. But it means the left side doesn't move very well effectively, but has normal sensation, and the right side moves pretty well, but has very limited sensation. And then underneath that, I have to live with the daily issues that go underlying issues that go along with the spinal cord injury. So like bladder, bowel function, sexual function issues, temperature regulation, spasms, all of those things. But to be honest, I realise how lucky I am to be here at all. So put into context, they're all things that I can sort of manage. So that was a very long answer, but that was as succinct as I could keep it.
It functions as a summary for what we'll talk about in many ways, and I'm kind of just keen to flesh out a lot of those elements. Starting with, well, first of all, thank you for sharing all of that. I'm sure it's something that you still wrestle with on a day-to-day basis, but you can tell it's a polished and distilled understanding of the reality of who you are and how you've got to here, which is a nice thing to hear, because I think the nature of the situation can be one that we wrestle with for years to come. But from a rugby perspective, chose it over cricket when you were 16. You went counties, England, age group stuff. Started with Bath Academy, didn't you, which is where you're from, and then it was just club to club, finishing at Wasps ahead of the accident in April 2017. But what were the fondest memories and the highlights of that career looking back? Because I can imagine sometimes it's easy to forget that you once were a high-class rugby player, but it must be something that you're incredibly proud to have excelled in, and there must be some really fond memories there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's actually weird. I got sent a load of photos last week because this isn't a deliberate plug, but I've got a book coming out later this year, and we were having to sign off some photos. And I always find it absolutely bizarre. They sent a load of photos to me playing for Dragons, which I hadn't seen before. And I'm like twice the size at full sprint, and I can't even relate to that anymore in my mind. I think because time's passed, and I suppose that's a good sign. It's kind of I've let go of that former life, and it shows I suppose that's a sign of acceptance. Um, but it brought back loads of fond memories. Before, it would probably, you'd ask me year one or year two, it's quite hard to think back to those times because, it was quite upsetting, that things had changed so much. But now I'm happy with where my life is and the different things I'm pursuing. It's good to think back. And in terms of highlights, obviously it always starts at school when you sort of start playing with your mates and you're playing rugby just for fun. Um, and I was lucky enough to go to Millfield down here, which is sort of big sports school, and we would win most of the time, which was great. So playing with my mates really was always a great experience. Things like Roslyn Park Sevens, winning that, and then throughout my career, obviously debut for Bath against Leicester at 18. That was a massive day for me because a terrifying day at 18 years old going up against a Leicester Tigers team that was kind of in his pomp. But also, I'd been watching that team as a kid my whole life. So to actually run out on the pitch in front of your parents was incredible. And then I actually nearly retired at 21. I had some recurring shoulder injuries, so that was a tough time. But then I ended up signing for Doncaster in the Championship. I went up north and gave it one last chance. And that year was pretty special because I thought it was all lost. I thought I was going to have to retire, having had a very promising start as a sort of young professional rugby career player. But I ended up playing for Donny, and it was a bit of a culture shock going from Bath to Doncaster. But it turned out to be like an unbelievable experience. So I was playing every week. And I probably came on more in that year and found my love for the sport again and realised that was intertwined with playing a lot. So I've been at Bath for the previous 3 years, and most of the time I was holding tackle bags because you're a young player at a top Premiership team. And then another highlight would be winning the Championship for the first time with London Welsh. So very famous club, probably one of the most famous clubs in the world back in the 70s and 80s. Numerous British Lions, but obviously it fell off the radar quite a lot recently in the last 20, 30 years. They'd never played in the Premiership before. And we sort of defied the odds to get promoted. And everything was working against us. Even the RFU were trying to block us from getting promoted, and we sort of managed to turn that round and go up. And obviously, that was a lot of players who had never even dreamt of playing in the Premiership. Never mind, sort of, you know, getting into the Championship in the first place. Were all of a sudden playing against Leicester and Exeter and Saracens, um, and I suppose that was the highlights. Was it always thinking back? Always been seems to be those times where it's overcoming adversity, if you like, and defying the odds, which kind of continues on into my later life, which we'll touch on. But they're the fondest memories. It's not going out for a great team all the time and playing for Wasps and thumping someone by 40 or 50 points. It's when you've really got a graph for it and you've overturned something. Those are the things you remember. It's not the days in the sun. It's the times you've really had to battle and earn stuff. And I've got loads of fond memories from my rugby career. A lot of them off the pitch as well, as you can imagine. Some great away trips and days out with the boys. But yeah, like you said, I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to play the sport that I love for 10 years. It came to a grinding halt, but if it had happened at 21 or 22, it probably been a lot harder to deal with. I sort of look back and I'm quite proud about what I did, and I managed to take a lot from it. And also, the sport has given me so much back, not just whilst I was playing, but especially since the accident. That rugby community's been amazing.
No, it's fantastic to hear, and I think what resonates with me the most there is the fact that the best achievements are the ones that you've earned the most or worked the hardest for, and they're well, in my own personal perspective, that's something that you said that really reminded me of the metrics that I attach to success in general, I guess, and my personal sense of achievement. But I think if we focus on the broader context around April, it was April the 8th, wasn't it, 2017? Just keen to understand sort of basically the beginning of this next phase of your life, and it was a family barbecue, wasn't it, where just an error was made, I guess, in simple terms. If you're happy to take us through it in a bit more detail, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so went round to a family friend's house for barbecue, and it was sort of the first hot day of the year. So obviously you choose the family friend that has a swimming pool. I'd never actually been down to the pool at their house before. It was my parents' friends, and after lunch just went down, and they had it was a feature pool, so the waterfall in one end, steep rock face, and I just wasn't really concentrating. I took my top off. I dived into water thousands of times in my life. And I just dived in where the waterfall hit the water, assuming it was deep. I must have subconsciously thought it was deep because you see waterfall and you think a bit plunge pool, and I dived in at a steep angle, and turned out to only be about 3 feet deep. And at the time, I was about 18 stone, and having that weight go straight through the top of your head was not great. And it straight away, I didn't know it immediately. I was just like, smack my head really hard. I didn't lose consciousness. I was like, I better stand up and make sure I'm not bleeding in their pool. It was when I couldn't stand up that I realized something was wrong. I was trying to move, but I couldn't move properly. I still had a little bit of movement in my arms to try and get myself to the surface, but it just wasn't enough. So quickly started to panic. That sensation of drowning is certainly not a nice one. And I just hoped someone had seen me dive in, and they had. They'd seen the angle. My dad had seen the angle I dived in at, my mate, so they came straight over and pulled me to the surface. And then I just lay there in the pool, and they floated me to the side. Fortunately, my dad's a retired GP, so he knew that must be something wrong with my head or neck, that something neurologically, if I couldn't move things. So he was telling me to try and move stuff, and I couldn't. And if could I feel things, and I couldn't. And so they kept my head still and called the ambulance. The air ambulance, unfortunately, was busy at a road traffic accident, with it being a Saturday afternoon, and but the ambulance came. Luckily, I had some mates there as well, because to get me out the pool at that size, it took about 4 or 5 people in a stretcher. So they got me into the ambulance, and what I thought was it was weird. At that time, I think I must have been in shock, because I wasn't massively panicking or anything. I just remember feeling quite relaxed and thinking, as long as I get to the hospital, I'll be all right. This would be my seventh operation. Had operations before. I always end up getting fixed. Um, but I think as time went on, things started to dawn on me at how serious this could be. And it was when I was laying in sort of the waiting room. They'd done the scans, and you could see there was like an um a few more people than you'd expect to be around your bedside in terms of doctors and surgeons running around talking to each other. This was pretty serious, and they transferred me straight to Southmead for an emergency operation, which I thought was going to take about 15 minutes to get there, and I thought it did. I was in the ambulance and looking at the doctor, and um, I was like, I'll just have a quick nap because I know how far it is. I'll have a quick nap. I was feeling pretty tired and drained, and they were like, "Do not go to sleep." That's all I can remember, and then I just remember getting to Southmead Hospital. And I've since learned that my dad told me a year later, no one had told me that trip took over 2 hours because they had to pull over three times to resuscitate me, which is a bizarre thing to think of, being so close to death or actually dying. And because for me, it wasn't pearly gates or bright lights, it was just feeling a bit sleepy and actually quite relaxing. So I think that element, that bit of fear of death well, first of all, it makes you realize how easy it was. I think my dad at that time, being a doctor, was the only person that knew that there was a possibility that that might happen. My neck was still dislocated, my spinal cord was cut in half, so I was in a very vulnerable position. And actually, the fact that they held me still in the pool, the fact that I was so close to a leading neurological hospital, it's all the coins started flipping in my favor. And I really appreciate now how lucky I was to have all of those things go in my favor, given the level of injury I had. And yeah, and then and the next lucky thing was the surgeon who was on call happened to be one of the top surgeons in the UK who had just come back from 2 weeks in the Maldives, so was having to do a Saturday night shift, which was again pure fluke. Dr. Neil Barua, and yeah, and then I woke up in intensive care.
It's when you talk about those coins flipping in your favor as well. I think the big one and the one that scared me the most in terms of knowing about your accident and the circumstances surrounding it is that I think I've heard somewhere in the past, and your dad reinforced it in something I've seen, saying that a lot of the damage done when paralysis is the risk is done by the people trying to move you or get you out of the situation that's put you into it. And I think the big one there is things could have been very different had, well, the chain reaction of things that started going in your favour, had your dad not known that, things could have been very different. And it
Yeah,
must be a very not humbling, but something you can look back on with a bit more positivity, knowing that those things started to turn a corner for you.
yeah. I think I'm very lucky in the sense that I haven't had to deal with any resentment or bitterness towards anyone, if you like, in terms of I dived into the pool, right? I made the mistake, and since then, everyone has done an amazing job to get me back to get me to where I am. So, in a way, actually, only having yourself to blame as soon as you accept that, it's just a mistake. It's hard. It was hard to start with because you beat yourself up, but as soon as you accept that it was a mistake, you don't hold that animosity towards anyone else. And you do hear a lot of the time with spinal cord injuries, and it's true, a lot of the damage is done after the injury, and often like you can't no one's going to deliberately do more damage. And the natural reaction, if you're a group of lads on holiday and you're pissed and you're diving into the sea or diving into the pool, you're going to pull them out of the pool as quick as you can, or out of the sea. It's only because my dad knew not to do that it didn't happen. And my physio later down the line, Pete, who became a really important part, still is a really important part of my journey, um, said that it was as if a bag of coins got thrown in the air, like 100 pennies, and they all ended up heads. And I know how lucky I am given the severity of my injury. I limped back in to see my surgeon 6 months later, who had done the operation. The last time he had seen me was pretty much on the operating table, and even he was like, tell you what, I'm quite impressed with myself. I did not expect you to walk back in here. So like, there's so many people to thank, um, going through the situation. I know other people have been in circumstances where there's been mistakes made by the hospital, or after their accident, or someone's done it to them. It was like a road traffic accident that someone else was at fault. Um, and I actually think that it's quite a good thing for me. It's been a quite good thing for my mental recovery that I've only really got myself to blame in that respect.
I think that probably must free you from the barriers that might come from playing the blame game as well. Because from what I've gathered, your recovery in the eyes of medical science has very much been a fuck this, I'm going to figure it out attitude rather than things that should conventionally be actually possible. And had you had somebody to blame, had you had fingers to point at, maybe you would have sat back a little bit more and thought, this isn't within my control. But from what I've gathered, that freedom to claim your sense of life back might have come from the fact that ultimately all the blame was on you in your mind.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. Um, for sure. I mean, the only thing was, I have wondered why I made that mistake. I've dived in so much water, so many pools before, and the sea, and obviously there was certain elements of the pool itself that made me think that that water was deep, and you think like, but then you dive off a cliff jump into the sea all the time. You need to check. Probably not so much anymore, but I used to. And you need to check how deep the water is, and that's my own thing. And actually, there was naturally, like all of these things, the insurance companies look into it. Is there a claim against the pool and all of these sorts of things? And I remember the lawyers speaking to me, and they were like, this was sort of a year down the line or something, and they were like, if we're going to go ahead with this, you're going to have to stop like publicly climbing mountains and taking on challenges where you're going up and down the stairs, because it's all going to get used against you. And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to do that for the sake of you know some money, potential money further down the line. I've found a purpose here, like trying to inspire others to get on with their lives and see what they can do and challenge themselves. And to me, that was more important. And I think, yeah, we will probably get onto it, but finding that purpose, um myself, and being, instead of being that playing the victim, um, being that sort of active agent and taking responsibility of my own mental situation and trying to move forward positively. And that was part of my healing process. I didn't want to play the blame game. That I knew that wasn't going to be healthy for me, even if it might end up financially rewarding at some point. So I made that decision quite early on, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of that as well is that in simple terms is very applicable to everybody, not just people that have had spinal cord injuries or been in your situation. The seeing yourself as a victim only gets you so far, but in terms of actually having that agency to take yourself forward, that's where I think a lot of people can take some simple lessons from an obviously very negative situation, but one that you managed to turn into not just a positive for your own healing, your own rest of life, but for others too, which is an amazing thing and something that I'll never be able to understand. Well, I hope not, but something that I don't yet understand is the emotions and the immediate feelings around being told Asia category A1, you will never walk again. Can you just describe what that felt like when you were told that?
Um, Felt like being punched in the stomach really hard. um, I think it was one. It feels like it's weird. It felt like all the life drained out of me immediately, but then it only for a second, and it was really hard thing to hear. However, I can't say it was a surprise. It'd been best part of a week, with no returning movement or sensation, and I kind of knew it was coming. But when people put it into words, it makes it real. But a surprising thing happened. It did feel like that, and I did look at my mum and my wife in the room, and it was all very emotional, and they were in tears, but then I realised quite quickly that, well, I don't think I've ever been very good at being told what to do anyway since I was a kid. And I've probably then it but all of a sudden became a challenge in my mind, and it was horrible to hear. But someone telling me that I couldn't do something, um, was the best thing they could have ever told me, because it wasn't like "fuck you, I'm going to prove you wrong." It was like, if I don't do, I'm going to do everything I can to, it's not like I know I can prove you wrong, but it's like I'm going to do everything I can to try and make this happen. And for me at that point, the biggest reason was because when he said I was going to try and you're going to try and get the use of your arms back to be independent. That word independent made me realize that it wasn't just about me and my recovery. Up until that point, I'd probably just been feeling sorry for myself, and then I realized that actually this was going to impact anyone that was going to have to care for me. What did this mean for my relationship? What did this mean for, what was my mum going to have to do? My dad going to have to do? And I said, look, so be it. If I try my best for 6 months or a year and turn around at that point and I haven't got any further, then I'll be able to live with it. But if I turn around in 6 months or a year and I'm still at this point, but I know I could have done more, and now it's affecting other people's lives, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. So I made that decision there and then to just give it absolutely everything. And up until that point, up until the point I got told there was no hope, I had no, I wasn't in that situation. I wasn't trying. I was just trying to bury my head in the sand. And ironically, when I got told there was no hope, that's when I really started trying. Um, and it was only a couple of days later that my toe wiggled, and something that I was told was never going to happen again. And that was it. That was the start of my body starting to return to me, and that was the sort of glimmer of hope that I was looking for, that I needed to hold on to, and the recovery really started there. So ironically, the hardest thing I ever heard in my life was also the best and most formative. It was the turning point, to be honest.
It's fascinating as well because, I mean, I'm not many years out of playing rugby at a recreational level. I had bigger ambitions at one point, but then everybody else hit puberty, and I suddenly realised that physics wasn't on my side anymore. But the character building and the attitude and mindsets that come from a rugby career and the formative elements that come from that, I think, will have been something that massively underpinned that attitude that you had in that situation. And that's the reason that I want my future children to give rugby a go. If they don't love it, then that's on them. But I just think the character building and the acceptance of the reality and the understanding that a problem can be solved in simple terms is something that has been very, very tangibly useful for all my friends and seemingly yourself in terms of how to manage uncontrollable situations in their day-to-day lives, not just on a rugby pitch. And it's it's incredible to hear that probably the most challenging thing you've ever been told in reality is the one that liberated you to become the man you are today, which you must be really proud of yourself for turning it around in the way that you have, because the odds were very much against you.
I think at the time you've got a decision to make, and if someone had told me how I would react to that news, if someone had asked me how I would react to that news before it happened, I'd have said I would have been devastated. I would wanted to kill myself then. I wanted to have end it all. But I didn't react like that, and that's not because that was just that was luck, I suppose, of character. Probably there was a lot of like you said, from rugby, having played rugby for a long time, you have to deal with the ups and the highs and lows a lot, all the time. Injuries, selection. You get used to getting bad news, and then trying your hardest to overturn it. You've been dropped this week. Right, what can I do about that? I'm not going to go and cry about it. I need to go and work harder. So there's probably an element of that there. But I would also say to other people who might be listening, going, "Oh, I don't know how I'd react in that situation." You might surprise yourself, because I surprised myself, and I think a lot of people react way better than they think they will. And I think the human brain and human spirit is a lot more powerful than we give ourselves credit for. And some people unfortunately, some people have to find that out by going through life changing or traumatic experiences, whether it's to them or someone they love. Um, but I think people probably don't give themselves enough credit. And since then, I've realized that people talk about the mindfulness gap, and it's like you can't, not having the ability to change what happens to you. Life happens to us, not for us. Things come our way all the time, and often these things are shit and hard. But you always have that, and you can't control what happens to you, but you always have that ability to control how you react. Um, and it was probably from that natural reaction that I had in the first place to be given that bad news that then later down the line, as I've had bad news that's come my way or difficult periods in my recovery, I've reflected back and I'm gone, well, it's not as bad news as that was. And I managed to react positively eventually to that. So let's just react positively to this. And once you understand you've got control over that reaction, you've got control over going, right, if I get angry or upset about this, is that going to benefit me moving forward? No. Right. So let's not do that. Let's park that and let's go, right, this is, let's see it as a challenge rather than something that's gonna fuck you up or gonna send you the wrong way. Just see it, right, how are we going to get around this? How can, and then further than that, not how are we just going to get around this, how am I going to use this to propel me forward in other areas? And I think it probably started at that point, and having to go through that experience, which you don't hope that people ever have to hear that, and people hear it in different ways. But actually, it was a building block, and understanding that a building block can, like that, such a formative building block can come from such a bad experience or such a bad thing to hear, makes you realize that when you hear other bad things, you go, right, how can I build and grow off this one? And it just changes the way you look at life completely, to be honest.
It's a theme that has come up several times before in these conversations, and one that I fully buy into because at a young age I feel quite fortunate to have a very developed sense of self-awareness, not in a braggy way, but that comes from a traumatic experience and one that was self-inflicted as well. So I think the more that these lessons can be extracted from those that have had the negative experiences, maybe less people need to suffer negative experiences before they have those epiphany moments where they realise that there are more things in their control than they perhaps realise. But no, it's a consistent theme across the somewhat pseudo-philosophical space of podcasts but and social media, but I think it's something that's generally applicable to most people's lives.
I think it's a consistent theme because it's true. And it's like, and people shouldn't stop talking about it because everyone else talks about it. Everyone has their own versions of it. And I think it's important for people to hear it, and to start to understand it, and to hear it enough times that they start to put it into practice themselves, because I think it is the most powerful tool any of us can have. And some of us get it from trauma, but others can work on it, and build that into their own lives and their day-to-day lives as well. So yeah, I mean, it's an important skill, so people should keep talking about it, I think.
I think trying to develop a proactive rather than reactive approach to it as well is very important as well. And it does seem difficult because changing the status quo when things aren't going really horribly wrong is the harder of the two options, isn't it? But the more people that share these stories, the more present the reality of how impactful this can be on us as individuals is. So the more that people can approach it proactively rather than waiting until they have their own negative experience, the better off I guess we all can be. But I've seen a picture of you in a wheelchair, what seems like early days, in front of a no diving sign, and it made me laugh because I know that you'll have found the humour in that. And a big question, it's probably got an obvious answer, but I deal with things and mask things and cope with things via humour, and I get the sense that you do too. And I'm just wondering how much of a coping mechanism for you, your close family and your friends was humour throughout the whole experience.
Yeah, hugely important. I think dark humor is very therapeutic. If you can laugh at a situation, you can immediately steal away its seriousness, no matter how traumatic that situation is. And I think that's something we've lost in the world with the woke movement. You've got to be very careful about what you say in any situation, whether you mean it or not, especially if you don't mean it, because people will jump on your back. But fortunately, being in a situation where I've got a spinal cord injury, and I have got a disability, and I have spent a lot of time in a wheelchair, and I do wet myself from now and again, and I have to wear nappies every now and again, and all of these situations which I can take the piss out of it, and I can take the piss out of myself, and it's really important. And actually, I found from the start that was one of the good things um, that was another benefit of coming from rugby. A lot of the rugby boys would come in and treat you very normally and take the piss straight away, and you spent the whole day with people doting over you and feeling sorry for you and going, "Oh, I hope you're okay. Oh, you look great," when you know you don't. You've got tubes coming out your nose and in your neck, and you've just had to have a bed bath and all sorts of stuff's going on. But then one of your mates come in and go, "Fucking hell, you look like shit." And you just both end up laughing, and it's the best, and that completely changes your mood because you know everyone else, and it's hard for people to do that. I get it. You want to say the right thing, or you don't know what to say in a situation like that. But one of my mates, Simon McIntyre, one of the Wasp props, came and brought me 3 juggling balls when I was still in intensive care and hadn't moved yet from the neck down, and was like, "Seeing as you're going to be in here a while, you might as well pick up a new skill." And it's just absolutely, it was brilliant. And, those little bits of laughter um, make all the difference. And actually, if you put a group of, I can only speak from a spinal cord injury perspective. If you put a group of spinal cord injured people who have all these wonderful, weird and wonderful things that go on, because once you damage your nerve, once you damage your spinal cord, it affects so many different things, as I've already touched on. So you can talk for hours, but you'll all take the piss out. You'll all take the piss out of the situation and laugh about stuff and when you did this and when you did that. And it's really therapeutic. But the problem is if you cross over into another area, so if you joked about, I wouldn't feel comfortable joking in an area that wasn't happening to me, which is a shame if you don't mean it. And I think that's where in life and modern society, no one feels comfortable to cross a line, if you like, when actually us being able to laugh and joke about those things is probably the best thing we can do, to move forward and have open and honest conversations rather than everyone sort of sit in their lane and worry about upsetting someone, if you like. And do you know what the stupid thing is? The people getting upset will never be the people that you're actually talking about. It'll never be like, if someone's making a joke in the spinal cord injury space, it won't be someone like me getting annoyed about it. It'll be someone random who decides to take offense to it and jumps down your throat. It's just a weird way the world works.
It's challenging. It's a difficult landscape to navigate, isn't it? And I think my biggest issue with the, whatever we want to call it, the woke culture, the sort of taking offence on behalf of other people that actually wouldn't take offence to it, is that it forces the people that find comfort in the humour to be placed into a box where the last thing in the world they want to be in is that box. I mean, for me, I will quite happily make jokes about my own mental health, my own suicide attempt, but if somebody didn't allow me to do that because that placed me into a certain category, that would make me feel more cut off from the rest of the world than it would if I wasn't able to. So,
but you
people
doing
find
that,
strength in community.
you doing that is going to benefit a lot of people listening who have been in a similar place to you, because again, you can remove that seriousness from it and go, hang on a minute, if Fergus can laugh about this situation further down the line, they know you don't mean it in a, it's a humor way, it's a dark humor way, it's a therapeutic way of doing it. You're going to help other people. But if you don't feel comfortable to do that because you're going to piss off Jane next door, who, you know, doesn't have anything to do with mental health, but will jump down your neck for it, you're going to stop helping people. And I've been very, I've had the odd person get pissed off at me through my social media for being open and honest and laughing about things that they don't find funny. But it's never someone who suffers with the same issues as me. If I wet myself and talk about it and laugh about it, a couple of people might get annoyed, but it's never anyone who actually suffers with the same issues. And that I'll get 10 times more messages from people who suffer with the same issues going, thank you so much for being open about that and talking about that. It doesn't get talked about enough. And I think almost we need to push back a bit in that space. And if you rely on dark humor to help yourself in your own situations, it should be celebrated and talked about, and and not, like you said, very rightly said, not put back in boxes, because we'll all just end up with no one to talk about, no one to talk to about anything.
Yeah, no, it's tricky. It's tricky. And before we dive down an incredibly risky PR rabbit hole, especially you having a book coming out towards the end of the year, we'll put that conversation in a box to be ironic, but. The next stage of your life focuses around Millimetres to Mountains, which we both have fantastic visions around logos on. The reason we first connected in the first place. But I know obviously the bigger vision behind it, but it'd be great for you to share what the premise and the bigger picture thinking for Millimetres Mountains is.
Yeah, so I found it all started when I climbed Snowdon after a year after my accident. I set myself the challenge. I was doing, 6 hours of rehab a day for the best part of a year, and I was kind of. It's hard to stick at that when you haven't got a goal in place before it'd be a rugby match or a future season to aim for that I'd rehab towards. This was just endless. It's how far could you get? I was still using a wheelchair a bit after about 9 months, but I'd started to walk around and cover some distance. Probably walked up to about 400 or 500 meters in total. And I said to my physio, look, I want to try and do something on the 1 year mark to repay Restart, who were the charity that had been supporting me through my physio since I left hospital. B, to set myself a goal so that I could carry on driving towards something, rather than just the abyss, to motivate me in my rehab. But C, and most importantly, to give other people in hospital, my mates that I'd spent 3 months on a spinal unit with, them in mind, but anyone that to give them to send them a message that just because you've been told something, been given a certain prognosis, doesn't mean that necessarily has to be the case. And if you believe it and you buy into it, then it probably will be the case, And I was very fortunate that I had other people giving me other advice and saying, as I drove forward, saying, you can get back on your feet. I did it, had outside support coming in, people have been through it before, but a lot of people don't have that. And they knew, and my physio Pete knew that if I didn't believe I could get better, then I wouldn't. So even if it was going to happen or not, I needed that hope there in the first place. And I'll caveat that with, obviously, you can only recover to within the scope of your injury. So if you've got a complete spinal cord injury, there's only so much recovery you can make, but you can always move on into a more positive life. And if you don't necessarily have to buy into the bottom end prognosis. So I just wanted to give some hope in that respect. So I set myself a challenge of climbing Snowdon. Took 9 hours. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, given how disabled I still was, I suppose. But I got this amazing sense of achievement from it. I opened it up on social media to anyone who wanted to come and join in, thinking a couple of people might turn up, and there were 70 people on the start line. So it was just this amazing time sharing, talking to people who were there for their own reasons, who were going through their own shit, and just I found it really rewarding. Not just being amongst those people, but being outdoors in space and taking on challenges and getting out my comfort zone. And that's where the seed got planted. And I started to think there's something in this. To cut a very long story short, I ended up going to Nepal a year later. Very lucky to have that opportunity to go over and help raise awareness for a spinal unit. Completely fell in love with the country. Came back and decided I wanted to help fundraise for it. So set up. It was called the M2M Group back then. We applied for. We as just a fundraising vehicle where me and a few other retired rugby players would run some dinners and stuff. But all the time I was carrying on climbing and going out to the mountains, and I was still noticing that actually, as well as it being helpful for me, it was really rewarding for the people who were coming and fundraising. So we were fundraising for the spinal unit, but then the idea for the charity came then, to take people who were also struggling with a bit of transition in their life, whether that be so it's mostly based around mental health. So it's but as a result of trauma. So something that's happened, it might be a physical injury, it might be a bereavement. We've taken people away with PTSD, and getting them into the outdoors, taking them on challenges, getting them out of their comfort zone, putting them in a different environment, and then afterwards, we fund 3 years of life coaching, retraining, therapy to really cement that change, and that mirrors my journey, that I stumbled across getting out into the mountains, but actually the real change that was made, that the reason I managed to realize those changes and move into a better headspace is because of my support network, really. So I want to offer people that as well. And the reason it's mental health and not just sort of spinal cord injury is because for me, everything is a mental injury. It's if you are a happy person in a wheelchair, then great. That's way better than someone who's unhappy walking around. So you're not necessarily trying to fix everyone to get them back to 100% physical recovery. It's just trying to get people into a positive place. And a lot of the time helping them refine some purpose in their life and giving them goals to move towards. And they've been put in a spin, or they've been put because of something that's happened to them, whether that be a physical injury, like I said, or something that's happened psychologically, like PTSD. But to try and help them through that, and put them on a new course. So that's what we do now with the charity. We still support the spinal cord injury unit in Nepal. We support the running costs of that, but most of all, we take people all over the world on challenges and put them into our development programs.
The profound and intimidating power of the outdoors is something that I think everybody needs more of in their life. And I say again, I place so much value in it, and I know if a fortnight goes by where I haven't put myself in a bit of a hole in a setting that just scares the shit out of me, quite frankly, or rather makes me feel incredibly insignificant, I'm worse off for it. My sleep is worse, my stress is higher. It's just it's a really simple way to recalibrate yourself and to realise that your day-to-day stresses, your day-to-day concerns, in the grand scheme of things, are very insignificant, and therefore you have the power over them to just consider them a little bit differently. And I do think the outdoors is one of the most powerful and underutilised vehicles to help people become more comfortable with their own mental health and the sliding scale of healthy to unhealthy that entails. So, no, it's a fantastic thing you're doing. I think that the premise and the vehicle for delivery makes perfect sense to me. But a lot of people don't yet realise how valuable that can be. I grew up in Scotland, and whenever my parents said, "Oh, look at the view," I thought, "Look at the view. What are you talking about? Why would we travel 5 hours in the car to stare at some trees?" And then went back on my PlayStation Portable or whatever it was at the time. But I think more people can learn more from the outdoors than they realise.
Yeah, I think it's. I love that word that you used the word insignificance there, and I think that's been quite a powerful realization for me. Is just how powerful a tool is realizing how significant you are and all your problems are, and the scale of nature and being in those places is the quickest way to do that, and I think once you realize that there's a power in realizing you're insignificant, and actually people don't really care about your problems, and your problems don't really matter in the scheme of humanity. You're just a space monkey spinning around on a rock in the middle of eternity. So it's like, and you're going to be here for a millisecond. So it's like, stop stressing about stuff. It's easier said than done, but it helps you in that process to stop stressing about stuff and start to do the things you love and enjoy, because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. And that seems like a bit of a backwards way to look at things for a lot of people, but nature helps people realize that. And I do believe it's weird being immersed in that world on a day-to-day basis, and I know you are as well, massively, and we have a lot of we're aligned on a lot of those things, but it's our greatest untapped resource. Most people don't get out there and do stuff and spend time in those places. I think the narrative's starting to change, but there's such a long way to go. It's there, it's right outside your window. You don't have to travel wherever you live in the world. You don't have to travel far to get into an amazing natural environment, and people need to do it more, whether they think they need it or not, because a lot of time it's people that don't even realize they need it. They go there and go, wow, I actually did need this, because they've just been caught up in the rat race for so long and so many years that they're numb to it.
100%, 100%. I think the big contradiction that sort of grinds my gears in the UK is the fact that people that feel they need to go abroad to experience these things, whereas, I mean, I'm, 5 days now, having completed the UK's most difficult and most incredibly ridiculously set triathlon, and I just came off that thinking the fact that this is in the country in which I live is just madness. Just madness. It was so peaceful, it was so serene, no mobile signal, everybody was there for the same reasons. Just incredible. And I mean, it was a 5-hour journey, but it was a 5-hour journey on my own terms, in my own nation, and so many people don't realise how much is on offer in their back door. You've got North Wales, you've got the Lake District, you've got the South Coast. Everybody has access to not being landlocked and not being caught in the rat race and the dullness and the monotony that goes with that from a what's the phrase? Just sort of a reconnective point of view. I think reconnecting with nature in one sense is the most powerful thing that we can all do. And we all have access to it in one way or another in the UK. So anyone that says you don't, I'll fight you on that. I am afraid.
Yeah, for sure. And it's what we're meant to be doing, right? We're all, you know, we're not supposed to be in cities in front of computers. You know, instinctually, we're all cavemen still. So we're supposed to be out in nature, and there's a reason why it makes you feel like that when you remove the noise from your life, and we're just returning back. You know, people say, I feel like when they go on these trips or come away with us, they feel like I'm climbing up mountains. Why do I feel like I've got more energy? And I don't. It's not it's not nature giving them energy. It's them removing the crap and then returning back to a normal level of energy where we're supposed to be the whole time.
Yeah. I can imagine that must be very rewarding hearing people say that, because it's just the realization that you've come to and giving that to somebody else is a powerful thing. But
they immediately take it back after you climb the next 1,000 meters.
That's it, isn't it? Yeah. On the descent, my knees, this is awful. Why isn't there a cable car? No, it's the age old question that everybody faces in these situations. But you were told you would never be able to walk again, and not long after that you were standing at your wedding. How did that feel in terms of a evolution of your journey, your experience, and your experience with Lois, most importantly, because she's obviously been a huge part of this, and for both of you, that must have, and friends and family, that must have been an incredible moment.
Yeah, it was incredible, and it was a huge driving force for me throughout hospital. Once I started, first of all, I wanted to be able to be independent. So that involved being able to use my arms, to use a wheelchair properly. That was my first goal. And then as the goalposts move on, the second big one was being able to stand at the altar, if you like, for the wedding, and which was due to happen a year later, and there was no certainty it would. We actually rang and cancelled because after the accident we said sorry because we couldn't reserve the dates. We thought they must give it away because it was a popular venue, but actually when we rang them again, when I started standing in hospital and said, look, let's go ahead with the date, we might have to move location now, they had actually been following the story and saved it for us, which was amazing of them. So that became the goal, and I think it was finding those reasons and those goals, those reasons why external to me was much more powerful motivation for me throughout the whole process. So initially it was looking at my mum and my wife and realizing, shit, this isn't just going to affect me, this is going to affect other people, so I need to put a lot of effort in. Then it was like, I want to stand at the altar because I want to give Lois the day she wanted. Before it was like, I need to get better so I can get back on a rugby pitch, or I can do this, and that just didn't act as strong enough motivation. And when I thought about it differently and focused on why I was doing things from another angle, and brought other people into the equation, it became a much bigger driving force. And it wasn't long before I was able to stand out of my wheelchair and prop myself up there. The wedding day was obviously incredible because it was just all the people who've been part of that journey over the last 18 months. And, and apart from the fact it was 35 degrees in Italy and I've got serious temperature regulation issues now because I don't sweat from the chest down, I nearly passed out and they had to speed up the ceremony, which my friends were really happy about because it ended up being like a 5-minute ceremony and they were just straight back on the beers then, which is kind of like the dream wedding for most people. But I managed to stay in one piece, and yeah, it was an amazing celebration, not just of us two being able to get married and giving Lois the day she wanted, but a thank you from us to all of those people that had been there for us over the last sort of 18 months. Yeah, an incredible day for sure. And she's been amazing, such a big driving force for me, even in hospital, because the NHS is an incredible beast. The acute end of it is an amazing thing that, they save people's lives. My life was saved, but everyone knows resources wise, especially in terms of long-term rehab, it really struggles. And if it wasn't for people like Lois learning to be my physios and being able to put those extra hours in between, and my friends who did the same, I'd be stuffed. And I know how lucky I was to have her, because a lot of people don't have a Lois or don't have people there in their room every day to give them extra physio. So for that, I'm eternally grateful.
No, I can imagine. And it's fantastic to see you both charging headfirst at Millimetres to Mountains, because she's board of directors, isn't she? What's her?
Well, so Lois is technically our only employee, even though we don't pay anyone. So it is still a passion project, but she runs the day to day because I've still got other things going on that I need to do to keep a roof over our head. So she's like operations director, if you like. Um, Although she doesn't actually get paid yet. We talked about potentially putting her on minimum wage, but then decided she doesn't deserve it. It's just to wind her up.
There we
No,
go.
she's
A
great. If it wasn't
gushing,
without her, it
a
wouldn't be happening.
gushing, a gushing thank you for all the work that she's done.
Yeah.
Retreated to the dark humour required. It seems like an innate, I've got to do it. I've got to do it. But no, I fully get that. I would have done the same. But there was a final question because I'm conscious of the time. What does the future look like for you? I know you've got some media things coming up. I know you've got a book coming out. But what are the big ticket items, the big ticket goals and ambitions that you have for yourself in the future?
So more immediately, obviously, I've got a book coming out in August, which is called Lucky, which you can pre-order on Amazon now. And the exciting things for me in terms of the media side, I'm going to Tokyo for the Paralympics to work with Channel 4, presenting on all team sport over there, which will be an amazing new challenge. And then I'm announcing today that I'm going to attempt to climb Mont Blanc in September with the help of Leo Holding, who is one of the Berghaus ambassadors. And it's something that I was told quite definitively that I wasn't going to be able to do last year when I started eyeing up, that I was nowhere near physically ready. So I've spent the last year trying to defy those odds again, being told I haven't been able to do something. So I've had, with the help of Berghaus, we're adapting a load of kit to help with my issues, and also Leo's going to help me get up there and trying to be another example to sort of overcoming adversity. So that's really exciting. But the broader answer to your question is I really don't know what the future holds. And for the first time, probably over the last year or so, I'm really excited by that. And before, not knowing what the future holds really used to make me nervous, especially when I was playing rugby. It's like, well, what else am I going to do in my life? Rugby's going to end at some point. Terrifying. I think not knowing what the future holds terrifies most people. But being able to pull back and lean on my processes, my values, and be confident in the fact that whatever gets thrown my way now, I have the confidence that I can deal with and grow from. I'm just excited about the fact I don't know what's around the corner. I don't want to know where I'm going to be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, and that feels great. And I think if you can get yourself to that position in life, then it's a good place to be. It certainly feels a good place to be for me.
No, I completely agree. I'm not quite there yet, but I have moments where I just have faith in momentum rather than actually any real structured planning, which is a nice feeling. So I can empathise with that. But it's all very exciting, everything you've got going on. I look forward to seeing the coverage of next weekend when you're up in Edinburgh, as well as the Paralympic stuff. That's very exciting and great to fly the flag for a community that you never knew you were going to be a part of, but now are integral to, which must be another great feeling. But beyond that, I know you need to get going, so I'm going to say thank you very much. Really enjoyed that conversation, and speak soon.
Well, thanks, mate. Honestly, I've been loving watching everything you're doing as well. Really inspiring stuff. So looking forward to catching up in a few months' time or even next year and having another chat about what we've been up to, because I know the stuff you do is equally as crazy and inspiring, in fact, more so. So keep at it.
Thank you very much. Although I will bat off the more crazy side of things. You've got that crown, and I'll hang up now so you can't say anything else.
Cheers, mate. Bye. Cheers.